Amos Opeyemi is the most promising talent Nigeria has seen in ages. His dribbling ability is off the charts, but that won't matter if he can't make an impact at the upcoming U20 World Cup and be scouted to Europe. The U20 World Cup has been a tournament where young talents can make a name for themselves. Messi, Aguero, Milinkovic-Savic, and Pogba have all appeared and excelled. While scouting has improved significantly over the years, gems do slip through the cracks. Who knows what talents could have been discovered at the U17 and the U20 World Cups in 2021 if it wasn't for COVID. An opportunity like that may never come again, which is why the tournament coming up in Indonesia, which definitely didn't get moved to Argentina, is crucial. It's especially true from those in Africa, where we've seen players from the continent go to clubs like Arsenal, Wolfsburg, RB Salzburg, etc. For Amos, the goal is like what many have: earn a lot of money and social media followers. Become the best, win the most prestigious club trophies, and help the first African country to win the World Cup. The 16-year-old from Ibadan is capable of playing as a cam or on the left. He recently signed with a local Nigerian club in the top division named Shooting Stars SC of Ibadan, a necessary step since he needed to be at a good club, as even if he got scouted, he'd only be able to leave for Europe at age 18. Preseason, he got the trust of their coach, Obi Pretorius, a manager who's also looking to make a name for himself. The faith for Amos was rewarded as he scored the winning goal on his debut. Now let's not forget that he's 16 years old, so playing senior football isn't going to be smooth sailing. However, this experience was crucial for him, especially with the roadmap ahead. In order to qualify for the U20 World Cup, Nigeria needed to finish in the top 4 of the U20 African Cup of Nations. With Landon Basso announcing him onto the U20 Super Eagles, it was time for him and his teammates to step up. There were a couple promising players, including Nathaniel Nwosu, who has been gathering interest from Europe, and Victor Aletu, who already achieved the dream and was at AC Milan himself. While Amos was frothing at the mouth about that, the three would get along well. The preparations for the tournament was pretty good too, with Amos assisting in a friendly win over Ghana. The catch is that he was forced to play out at left wing, which he does at club level, but it wasn't his favorite position. Nevertheless, the U20 AFCON was beginning, and Nigeria were in the same group with Algeria, Ivory Coast, and Angola. In the opening fixture, Amos was showing promise. He missed a massive opportunity in the 38th minute and smacked the crossbar just after the half. However, he was getting tired pretty quickly. With another shot in the 59th minute soon leading to Nigeria's opener, they would hold on. Although, Amos was subbed off in the 67th. In the second fixture, it was the Ivorians who would open the scoring. Nigeria immediately equalized. Although, for Amos, it was more of the same story. He was losing fitness rather quickly, and without doing anything memorable, he was subbed off 60 minutes in. His team would get a scare with 18 minutes remaining as the Ivorians won a penalty. Zare stepped up to take the lead, but Nwosu made a massive stop to keep his team in the game. That proved to be massive, as in the 90th minute, Induka from 25 yards out smashed home a free kick. Another win meant they could rotate versus Angola. Although, the problem of Amos' fitness continued, where he couldn't even make the bench. Was it a message from the coach? Regardless, Nigeria won 2-0, making the semi-final and officially qualifying for the U20 World Cup. In the semi-final, they would face Ghana, where the Ghanaians got a contentious penalty. There was mass outrage as they slotted it in, and they would double their lead, scoring an incredible free kick. Amos continued to have fitness issues as he struggled and was subbed off well before Nigeria's consolation goal. The Super Eagles would finish third in the tournament with 2 late goals versus South Africa, although once again, Amos was disappointing. 4 starts and a 6.45 average rating wasn't going to catch anyone's eye, while all the plaudits went to Nwosu, who kept 3 clean sheets. Ivory Coast would win it all, defeating Ghana in the final, but it was time to prepare for the U20 World Cup, which was happening in just 3 months. The lead-up saw Amos' league form improve, as he ended his season with 5 goals and 3 assists. He also got to participate in the Under-23 AFCON qualifiers, where he scored and assisted in a match versus Lesotho. The U20 boss Landon Basso was also trying to adjust his system to get the most out of him. That'd be using a classic 4-3-3, but making the wingers turn into wingerless wingers.
You just moved them to cams! Shut up.
Nevertheless, the system got a victory over Costa Rica in a friendly, although Amos wasn't available to test it out. Nigeria's group was favorable though, and with the opening match versus Wales, the young Super Eagles were dominating. A slight problem arrived in the 34th minute, however, where Amos got a bruised ankle, but he continued to dazzle, getting a pre-assist for the opening goal scored by Aya Osi. Amos would hit the post prior to halftime, but due to the injury, it was safe to take him off. Wales began to look dangerous in the second half, causing Nwosu to make a big save from distance. However, later on, Ioc would step up again to double Nigeria's lead. Sidas and Vangfo got a third late, as 3 points were on the board. I'm most impressed, but his wingerless winger partner Ioc got all the plaudits. South Korea were next, and they defeated Panama 2-1 in their opening fixture. It seemed like this would be Nigeria's biggest challenge, especially with Amos and Ioc having fitness concerns. However, they both played, and Amos won a penalty in the first moments of the game. Vangfo tucked it home, and just 5 minutes later, Amos would get his first assist, finding Longback, who made a great run from midfield. Amos was doing some great defensive work too, winning the ball back and finding Vangfo, who hit the bar. Just to be safe, the coach took both false wingers off, as no more goals occurred, and Amos finished with an 8.0 match rating. 2 wins on the board meant Nigeria automatically advanced to the knockout stage. With a potential fixture against an incredibly difficult opponent, a lot of players were rested versus Panama, yet they won 4-0, 9 points, and their reward was to play 6-time winners Argentina? What a cruel draw this proved to be, as South Korea, who finished in 3rd, got to play another 3rd place side in Greece, where they got smoked 6-1. Granted, that was after they defeated Uruguay. So game day arrived, and all the other African teams were eliminated before Nigeria stepped onto the pitch. The hope was that Argentina was tired, because they were in a must-draw match versus USA, but it proved to show that their national might was too strong for Nigeria. 8 minutes in, and Sioane casually steps into the box and scores a nice goal. The Nigerians looked at each other wondering, is this what we're dealing with? They responded well with Amos finding space for a decent chance. Unfortunately, Argentina would hit it into second gear, as Luna made a couple defenders look silly, finding Gokto for the second. Abe wasn't helping his teammates by losing the ball to Roman, who shot rebounder to Mamini. 3-0. Amos got a big chance after the half, but again, he couldn't convert. Abe then ends his disaster class of a performance by handling the ball with no one around him, leading to his second yellow. A nightmare scenario, but despite being down to 10, the team kept fighting, and Amos would get one back. And Vangfo then got a glorious opportunity with 15 to go, but he shot it right at the keeper. Argentina then goes down and grabs a 4th. Despite Dabani scoring a 2nd with 10 minutes remaining, the Argentines were too strong, wrapping it up with a 5th and shattering Amos's dream of lifting the U20 World Cup. The kid showed promise and was one of the youngest players in the tournament. However, his moments happened in games where not many people watched, or like in this last fixture, where he was completely overshadowed by Argentina. As he watched the final at home, seeing Italy defeat Spain, mostly due to Bajcetic being sent off, he saw the awards being given out. The Golden Glove was given to Ferran Keklas, the Bronze Ball to Savio, the Silver Ball to Felipe Amaral, and the Golden Ball to Hugo Novoa, who also won the Golden Shoe. Amos was only 17, while these guys were at least 2 years older. But even with the U20 World Cup happening every 2 years, that doesn't mean he'll ever get a chance to play in it again if his country doesn't qualify. So, was Amos just going to miss out on going to Europe? His teammate Nwosu got looks, but even he wasn't signed. Regardless, he had to continue another season in Nigeria, and he and his team were doing great by the time AFCON rolled around, 2nd in the table, and great performances across the board. He even got a national team call-up in a friendly versus New Zealand, as Jose Percero wanted to see what the teenager could show. He wouldn't make the AFCON roster, but did appear in the 2024 African Nations Championship, which is like AFCON, but only features players from the local leagues. Amos dominated, getting the winning goal over Congo and assisting against Sudan. Unfortunately, he got injured and was out for the rest of the tournament, seeing Nigeria lose in the quarters. He'd miss over a month of action, and in the few months he wasn't with his club team, they completely fell off a cliff, winning 4 matches in 4 months. Who knows what Obi Pretorius did with that team while he was gone, but he got sacked at the end of the season and retired from football. Although, there was a glimmer of hope with Amos. All these international appearances, including a 2nd cap at senior level in a friendly versus Uganda, there was one team beginning to take notice. Amos was 18 and was eligible to go to Europe, and his dream materialized as for 64K, he was transferred from Shooting Stars to Nice of France. That's where his journey continues, where the goal is to establish himself as a starting player. In Amos Opeyemi's first season at Nice, not much happened.
This card is useless.
He clearly wasn't ready for first team football, only making 6 appearances off the bench, while his dribbling skills were beginning to be compromised in order to get smarter on the pitch. Adjusting to a new country is difficult, and you've seen many players in the past struggle, so Amos had to be patient. But with playing time looking slim heading into the 2025-26 campaign, Nice boss Albert Capellas decided to send him out on loan. Then the loan deal fell through because apparently you can only lend 7 players to French clubs.
Going nowhere. I'm
So, this guy was sacrificed, and Amos went to Angers in Ligue 2. With members like Nabil Bentaleb, Souleymane Doumbia, and former Southampton player Jan Valery, the side was strong and favorites for promotion. Amos' debut arrived off the bench in a 1-0 loss to Nimes.
So you don't even deserve to exist.
In the following fixture with Guingamp, he would make his starting debut, and that proved to be a lot better. Off a free kick, he found his teammate Adrien Hounou for a header to make it 1-0. Arnaud Nordin later doubled the lead, as Amos earned a victory for his team. Now, if you came here for more goal contributions, you'd have to wait a whole lot longer, as despite earning 25 more starts across the season, that was his only assist. Crazy, since he played as a cam in every single one of those. Although, let's keep in mind that even JJ Okocha wasn't lighting the stat sheet up when he started in the lower German tiers. Nevertheless, he did bag a couple in the French Cup back in November, but the club were eliminated in the 10th round to Lorient in January. That's when the form began to fall apart for Angers, as promotion was beginning to look uncertain. Even when Amos scored his first goal for the club, it was just a throwaway, as Hoyland, not that one, scored a brace. That was on matchday 27, which was followed up by a 0-0 draw to Grenoble. Then, with the score level half an hour in versus promotion rivals Dijon, Amos would take the lead, which was crucial, for about 6 minutes. Brian Soumare found his second for Dijon, as the game ended 2-2. Amos wouldn't play too amazingly in the next 3 fixtures, but Angers earned 7 points, raising them to 3rd, 3 points behind the automatic spots of Dijon and Saint-Etienne, but both had to play Brest, who were fighting for a spot as well. For Angers, Sochaux were their opponents, and they got 3 penalties, and they missed 2 of them. Luckily, Bentaleb scored the rebound off the second. Meanwhile, both Dijon and Saint-Etienne drew, dropping the gap. On the final match day, Angers faced FC Annecy, who were trying to avoid relegation, but their fate was doomed. In the 7th minute, a cross arrived for Amos, and as he leapt like Didier Drogba, he got pretty lucky that it went in. With Camara's strike not too long later, Angers won, and best of all, Dijon and Saint-Etienne lost, meaning Angers finished on top thanks to Amos's brilliant goal, his first piece of silverware in the professional game. And this was a good building block, as he made some solid improvements to his game. In the lead up to the following season, Amos got called up to the Nigeria national team for the 2026. So moving on, that wasn't a good omen, as he got news from Nice boss Capellas that he wouldn't be involved with the team this campaign and needed another loan. He had several options, including returning to Angers to help their first season in Ligue 1 after 3 years in France's 2nd tier. He joined Toulouse.
I wouldn't go anywhere near him.
They do have better facilities, but would that end up being helpful for his development? Not at all. Despite being promised and labeled as a regular starter, Laurent Batlle played a 4-4-2, and once he realized Amos wasn't suitable for any of the roles in his tactic, he just left him on the bench, where he made just 1 appearance off it by the time he got sacked. That was in October, with Toulouse having a mere 5 points. These were enraged, but calmed down a little after Omar Daf was appointed. The former Dijon manager knew about Amos's ability and promised above all to get the club out of the relegation spots, and assured Nice that Amos would be in his plans. He was a man of his word, as no matter how shit he played, Amos was in the starting 11 week in and week out. He earned 21 starts for Toulouse, gathering 2 goals and 2 assists with a 6.84 match rating. Not great, and while he wasn't improving the way many expected, he did enough to help Toulouse avoid relegation and even finish above Nice. It's not like that's an impressive feat or anything, since they finished in 14th, which resulted in the sacking of Albert Capellas. He never really gave youth a chance, with the youngest regular starter being 26. That's where Jakub Nistrup arrives. With his accomplishments at FC Copenhagen and the ability to develop some of Denmark's finest talents, he was ready to not just give Amos a chance, but several other promising talents. Specifically in the midfield, with Algerian Abdelkader Moussaoui, Mehdi Bousson, whose hair in-game is red, and finally Marvin Wathieu, who was the gem of the academy. They grooved with Amos's vibe, but he decided to hang out with some of the more balanced and experienced players. Could Amos cement himself in the starting 11 and develop into the player many in his homeland expected? After 3 years being a contracted Nice player, we got to find out, as on opening day, he got the start versus Nantes. With the lack of multiple explosive wingers in the lineup, Nice decided to use the wingerless winger variation of the 4-3-3 that Amos was ever so familiar with. His partner would be Sofiane Diop, who found Zerben in behind for the opening goal. Half an hour later, Nice would have a corner kick. And from the clearance, Amos got on the ball, beat the defender, and found the back of the net. His first one with his parent club. A fantastic start, which was followed by another win against Strasbourg. Amos played well again, as he was unlucky not to get an assist. A solid beginning, but he was having concerns. There were rumors of him not being called up to the Nigeria squad, so he began complaining to his teammates that he wants to be playing more to keep his spot in the national setup. They were confused, as he was starting, but he wasn't called up for a few friendlies, which caused paranoia. He told Niedstrup that he needs to be playing regularly. The Dane was very perplexed, and asked if he had short-term memory loss. At the end of the day, if you play well, you will start, but you're young. You won't be perfect every single time, so matches from the bench won't hurt you in the long term. Nice lost a couple key individuals over the last few seasons, which had impacted the quality on the pitch. So when tougher opponents came up in the schedule, the team fought hard, but painfully lost to Monaco and Lille while drawing Rennes at home. Over the ensuing month, it wasn't looking pretty for Nice, as Ajaccio was the only win you'd see in some time. Amos played well, and Zerben achieved a hat-trick, but the matches around that were ugly. A loss to Bordeaux, a draw to Montpellier, wasteful finishing in a draw to Lyon, followed by Amos and his teammates dropping an absolute stinker against Marseille. Then, down 2-1 versus Clermont, the Nigerian was subbed in with 15 to go and had a glorious opportunity to equalize, but he scuffed it, and the players left the pitch in a chorus of boos. Diop was injured for the last few fixtures, but was returning. The Frenchman garnered a lot of respect and had the role to mentor Amos, Moussaoui, and Buisson. His return signaled a turnaround for Nice, as they won 4 of the next 5 games, only just losing to PSG. Diop of course balled out, scoring 4 in these matches, but there was a new kid on the block. From South Africa, but I'm just gonna call him Motebang. He was bought on deadline day from Supersport United and couldn't hit the net to save his life. I almost remembered him from the African Championship of Nations a few years ago, where he scored in the final, but never thought he'd see him here. While he was very rough around the edges, the man had pretty good physicals and was determined to try and score again and again. In this mentioned run, he banged in his first 3 of the season, which included this back post header versus PSG. Amos also had contributions, like diving to win a pen versus Lens. Still, the performances were admirable, and with them playing the Nigerian's former loanee club next, defensive midfielder Christensen got sent off before half, forcing Amos to be sacrificed. This began more mediocrity for the club, an elimination in the French Cup to Dijon, drawing the worst team in the league, drawing Monaco, and losing to Rennes. All in January, which was when 2 players were signed, Vasco Sosa and Ivan Morante. Despite them not really being needed. At least a few defenders arrived to provide depth, as Nice were in 9th, still in search of Europe. Through all of this, Amos was slowly improving, but not to the pace of his French colleagues, Buisson and Wathieu. The latter rarely ever put in a bad game, and made sure he never left anything on the pitch. That of course included his match versus Lille, where he and Moussaoui contributed to Zerben's brace. A tough draw at Bordeaux occurred straight after, but at Ajaccio, Amos won the ball to find Diop, and he assisted Motebang. Unfortunately, Nice keeper Karneshki decided to be a moron and allowed the big show to score from half. After the interval, Amos completely missed the net, but he'd make up for it by taking Buisson's pass and getting the lead back for Nice. That was enough, and Amos' teammates would make it an undefeated February with a late winner versus Montpellier. Lyon and Marseille were occupying European spots that Nice wanted, so these 2 next fixtures could really swing the season. At the Parc Olympique Lyonnais, Amos stepped up as Buisson found him for the quick opener. It was a tight contest between the 2 clubs, with both missing big chances, but that wouldn't be the case for Ikone. Then just before halftime, Simeone would nod in the go-ahead goal. Nice continued to miss some decent chances as they fell 2-1. A tough result, and the team knew Marseille was a must-win for European football. 3-0 32 minutes in had the Allianz Riviera roaring, and while Marseille brought 2 back in the second half, Nice found the momentum they needed. Could they at least grab the last European spot with 8 games remaining? They lost to Clermont. Yeah, Amos dropped a stinker in that one. However, he was competent enough in the next 2 fixtures, which saw a Diop brace versus Lorient, and Motebang also grabbing 2 at Reims. With Lille losing 3 in a row, That gave 7th place to Nice, although they had the French Cup final trump card. But it's PSG and FM, of course they lost it. However, they rebuilt their form by that point, while Kylian Mbappe'd Amos. But he and his South African teammate were able to contribute in wins versus Lens and Metz. 7th was still safe, as Marseille were being overwhelmed by the Europa League, seeing them only win in Ligue 1 once in April. After being eliminated by Porto in the Europa League, PSG smacked them up on the penultimate match day. Oh, they actually drew. Well, that doesn't matter, since Nice won their final 2 matches, which included Amos getting 1 against Nantes. However, he's not quite there yet. The Nigerian is scoring more than some would suspect, but his assists were pretty low, although that may be down to Motabang's poor finishing. Still, the room is there for him to grow, and with a good group of promising players around him, he'll finally experience European football for the very first time next season.
Is the truth.
It hasn't even been 10 years since the tournament was created, but Amos Opeyemi was riled up to play some European football. Sadly, changes are always made at football clubs, as some want new challenges or bigger ambitions, or more money. However, when Marco Korneszki was sold to Chelsea for a mere £8 million, someone should have slapped the director of football in the face. A few other members went, but none as big as Sofiane Diop to Newcastle. A tough loss, as he helped a bunch of the youngsters out, including Amos. The Nigerian would have to step up to replace his contributions, but the director of football did not have a bad replacement for him. On loan, they got Bulgarian Dominik Yankov, who with his stern face was ready to help Nice. A couple keepers came in, as well as Nsoki and Andrew Guevara to provide depth with more matches this season. So where did all that money go? Oh, in order to qualify for the Conference League, Nice had to get through 2 qualifying rounds. The first round versus Honved was super easy, as Motabang scored 5. How are you scoring half of what you did in Ligue 1 in 1 match?
I was a better player than you, come on.
The second leg was a fun affair, with Amos resting with the starters, and they did so again in the final qualifying round against Vozdavac. They weren't even a top 3 side in Serbia, but turned into prime Brazil before the interval. The coach basically treated this as a friendly, and when you don't take things seriously in Serbia, like leaving Neskovic wide open late,
you're just a clown.
Nice needed an all-time performance at home, and instead got a 6-minute injury to new signing Jibril Sow. However, Motabang kept smiling. Amos was going to say something, but decided to let things be, and good thing he did, as minutes after Musawi was subbed in, Motabang found the opener. Less than 10 minutes later, and there was nobody catching up to the South African, as he was pulled down for a pen, with Tofik slotting it in. The turnaround was complete in just 30 minutes, with Watiao finding Motabang, who lobbed the keeper. The kid was on fire to start the campaign, single-handedly qualifying the team into Europe, and scoring 2 in 4 Ligue 1 starts. However, Amos was doing his thing in Ligue 1, getting 1 goal and an assist versus Monaco with a 9.4 match rating. But the focus today is the Conference League, so who cares about that? By this point, UEFA's newest competition is a league phase rather than a group stage, which kinda seems odd since you still only play 6 games. Nevertheless, these were among the favorites, as any club in the top 5 leagues would be. The other ones to watch out for are Osasuna, who are led by the local maestro Aymar, along with 19-year-old Arcaiz Orkeo and captain John Mancayola. From Germany, it was Hoffenheim, who actually won this competition 2 years ago and are ever so familiar with it. They have an absolute wall in defense, led by captain Omar Rakik, Jordan Bayer, and the light-hearted Stefan Poggenberg, who at his age may be the best center back in this competition. Then there's Italy, who are represented by Napoli, or Parthenope. Still filled with several players from the start of Amos's journey, they're probably the favorites with the additions of Lorenzo Luca, Brahim Diaz, Nicolo Rovella, Francisco Trincao, and so many others. There are others from throughout Europe who could pull off an upset or two, so you can't take the foot off the pedal in any of the fixtures, which may have happened versus Hearts. Mikey Johnson's equalizer was not a good look for Nice, as they had a fairly easy schedule, but it didn't go that way. Next up were Ludo Goretz, who were stubborn defensively, but Amos' surprisingly dangerous header caught their keeper off guard. A first win, but in a visit to Portimonense, where no one seemed to care about watching, it was the home side's Iago Cariello who opened the scoring just 5 minutes in. As fans tried to go to the stadium to buy tickets after hearing about this, they were rejected at the door. Despite the setback, Amos was playing well, but it would be his wingerless winger partner Yankov who'd find Mota bang for the equalizer. People were wondering where Mr. Conference League was at, but he actually had a stinker outside of the goal. The same can be said for the defenders marking Yago, who exposed their flaws in the final seconds to steal a victory. With Livingston in late November just before PSG, Amos and several others were rested. The Scottish encounter was better than Hearts, with Mota bang continuing to add to his tally with a brace. 2 fixtures remained, and Nice were 1 point off the top 8, which would put them straight into the round of 16. They played IK of Sweden and Poland's Jagiellonia. Their clubs, Nice should be defeating, especially the Swedish side, who hadn't won a game up to this point. It was looking even better when Amos found Mota bang for a tap-in only 3 minutes in. 4 free kick taking, I see. This was a wild first half that continued with Amos laying it off for a Watiao smash hit. That didn't last long, as Insoki decided to play games and allow Farage to steal the ball, taking the lead back. But don't you fear, Mr. Conference League decided to show up and tied back up prior to the interval. A first 45 filled with everything. The second half was much different, but the only thing that would replicate is Nice's abysmal defending, which saw IK taking the lead once again, and this time, they kept it. In the final fixture versus Jagiellonia, Amos balled out, but just like LeBron with an injured Cavalier squad versus the Warriors, the man got no help. Meanwhile, the defenders' Soriatis allowed Bornichuk to score twice on them, resulting in a 2-0 loss. Nice barely qualified for the playoff round, finishing in 23rd. They played Rapid Vienna in February in order to make the round of 16. So about this being an easy schedule, all of them finished above Nice.
Abysmal.
There were a lot of transfers in January, but the only notable ones were Zerbin leaving for Al Ain, Billy Thomas arriving from Liverpool on loan, and a competent left back in Reini Breinberg. The Liga season was going alright. Nice were currently 6th, but really struggled with their output. Amos was doing fine, but when the top scorer Mota bang is getting half the goals he's getting in European competitions, then that's a recipe for an underwhelming campaign. Amos and co needed to defeat Rapid Vienna over 2 legs, and with the home tie first, they needed to be sharp. Of course he got that one. That mistake rattled Vienna, as Amos and Yankov each scored before the half. Nothing else occurred, and with a less than memorable second leg, Nice advanced to the round of 16, where they'd face Trabzonspor. The same needed to happen with them, dominate the first leg at home, and make things boring in the second. The Turkish side were more of a challenge though, as despite Christensen's stunning free kick, Trabzonspor wouldn't roll over. Just after half an hour, Tofik misjudged the ball, leading to Hassan Demir's equalizer. After a passionate talk from coach Nistrup, Amos was attracting all the attention, and the new left back Breinberg was found living every fullback's dream, and actually scoring when they went forward. The Turkish defense then couldn't handle Mota bang's pace. Unfortunately, Trabzonspor had a free kick specialist of their own, with Bardi banging one 69 minutes in. A small advantage. However, it wasn't over, as Buisson's attempt to find Mota bang didn't quite work out as intended. The 2-goal margin gave the team enough confidence to close out the second leg with a 0-0 draw, moving towards a quarterfinal encounter with Grasshoppers, the Swiss football club and not the insect. On paper, not the strongest Swiss side, as they've only finished in the top 3 once during Amos' career. Although, the first leg was away, and they kept another clean sheet, but couldn't score themselves. The second leg brought more of the same. The Hoppers defended well, preventing any clear chances until the 79th minute, as Amos was on the ball for a free kick. He made a decent delivery to the back post, but Moussaoui was marked by 2 men. Fortunately, one of them pushed the Algerian and were awarded a penalty. Yankov barely slotted it in, but when you thought the Grasshopper had nothing in the tank, Radsevic's free kick hits the post and goes to the wide open Momo. So extra time arrived, and with the reality of penalties approaching, Son decided to do some work, and despite being surrounded by 2 defenders, he put in a brilliant pass into Jurasic's path, and the Czech got tripped up, meaning another penalty. With all the pressure, Yankov smacked it in the middle. His 2 pens were the difference maker, with Nice squeaking through to the semi-finals. The 4 teams mentioned earlier, those were your semi-finalists. Osasuna played Napoli, while Nice were up against Hoffenheim. The lead up towards it wasn't great, as Amos was rested with some fitness issues, while Nice got smacked by both Rennes and PSG. Hoffenheim weren't doing great either, losing 8 straight Bundesliga matches in a row and barely getting by Hearts with an extra time pen themselves. The opening leg was in Germany, and imagine this, your first European semi-final in club history. You have possession, but you give it away in your opponent's counter and score. How do you respond? By having your best chances being taken by your center mid and doing jack sh. Amos didn't have a bad game, but Hoffenheim's defense was tough to break through, which made this even more puzzling. Regardless, the second leg was at home, and this game wasn't going to be about Amos, but instead, Motebang. He may not have been born with the technical gifts that Amos possessed, but he had the desire to go again and again. Maestroni gets caught napping in the 5th minute, and Motebang wins it, runs down, and equalizes the aggregate score. Only 16 minutes later, it's Yankov who finds the space for the South African to run into, and he passes by the keeper for a second. Now Hoffenheim weren't going to roll over, as Vet Yen delivered an insane low cross to Sanders, equalizing the aggregate. It wasn't all perfect for Motebang either, as he had a chance that was just off. Amos also had a big chance, but the team headed to extra time. Both sides were tired, and with the clock ticking to the 120-minute mark, Hoffenheim's keeper casually got the ball, but decided to stray further away from the box. His clearance is then well off, as Moussaoui intercepts and sees space for Motebang. Perfect pass, and the South African runs and caps off a legendary performance, seeing Nice reach the Conference League final. Before this match, Hoffenheim only conceded 2 all tournament, so it was off to Valencia. But despite Nice claiming 6th in the league, Motebang was injured in the last fixture. A twisted ankle, which would see him miss the final versus Napoli. To add more issues, the backup striker Chalov, along with several others, weren't registered. That forced Yankov at striker, with Amos now partnering with Buisson. They had Watiao and Moussaoui behind them, and over the last year, they grew closer and have developed into great players. Moussaoui had 10 assists in the Conference League, Buisson started to blossom, Watiao was inching closer to a world-class level, and Amos made huge strides in his playmaking abilities, as was showcased with his assist against Bordeaux. Could the starting 11 bring a trophy to Nice for the first time in 32 years? Here we go. I will be your commentator today. Napoli versus Nice to win a European trophy. Trincao now. Trincao on the ball. Great ball to Brahim Diaz, but it is stopped by Keller. Here we go. Nice on the attack now. Whips in. Buisson heads it just wide. Absolutely great playmakers on Napoli. Oh, risky pass, but they get away with it. Buisson now sends Yankov. Yankov, he's got an opportunity. Yankov has taken the lead against Nice. Incredible scenes. Oh my gosh, we don't have the replays on for goals. Crap. Breiberg now. Watu. Yankov. In behind to Amos. 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 Amos makes it 2-0 for Nice. What a start. 25 minutes in. No out-and-out strikers for Nice. It doesn't matter. Their playmakers are getting the job done. Amos on the ball. Amos. Some of the best dribbling we've seen in the world. Probably the best dribbling in this competition. Breinberg though. He finds Buisson. Yankov. Oh my gosh, Yankov cleans up the garbage and makes it 3-0 for Nice. They're missing their star striker, the top scorer in the Europa League. It's looking like they haven't needed him. Amos chasing Di Lorenzo though. Can he prevent a cross? He does. Great defending by Amos. But he can't deal with it there. And Di Lorenzo finds Trincao to get one back for Napoli. It is not over. Nice are on the counter. Yankov on the ball. Yankov, what can he do? He finds Breinberg. What you? That's a half at the Nuevo Mestalla. Or the lack of subs is the Danish manager of Nice. A little nervous. Oh no. Insoki with a very clumsy challenge. And it's going to be a penalty. Can Napoli get one back and make these last 10 minutes interesting? Raspadori makes it 3-2. We got a game on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. Napoli are 1 goal away from sending this into extra time. Estupinian on it. Zielinski gets a pot shot there, but it's saved by Keller. Arroyo to Rovella. Rovella. Is he going to shoot? They're giving him time to shoot, but nope, nothing there. Amos does not win the header, but he gets it back from Yankov. He finds Buisson. Buisson to So to Amos. Ooh, he does not seal the deal. Napoli's still alive. Free kick with 30 to go. Zielinski out on the way by Amos. Buongiorno now on the ball. He loses it. And now it's Nice on the counter, but they just kick it away. It's over. Nice have won the Europa Conference League. What a sight. What a run. Nice are your winners of this season's Europa Conference League. And Amos wins his first trophy. About 1 year later, one match away from a consecutive European final, Amos Opeyemi started out in the Nigerian leagues, and with his ridiculous dribbling abilities, was able to find his way to Nice. It hadn't been perfect, but last year's UEFA Conference League triumph was just another example of the road he was on. However, like many clubs, turmoil begins to happen, and things don't go the way many expect. That was Nice in Ligue 1 for the 2029-2030 season. Their director of football allowed Moussaoui to leave for Sociedad, and the Conference League top scorer Mota Bang to Leverkusen. How he got a big transfer before Amos is a bigger mystery than Lukaku's Champions League strike. Nevertheless, they got a bag for them. So, who came in to replace them? 32-year-old Rafa Mir and bloody Jason Knight? Same vibes. They did have the Spaniard who came in on loan. Just call him John. But all that did was force Nistrip, the manager, to play Buisson at striker since Rafa Mir was as unreliable as Ronald Koeman. Oh wait, different universe. By November, Nice had as many wins in Ligue 1 as they did in the Europa League, which was 2. They were 15th before their fixture with Rennes. The XG table thought they should be in 6th, but due to a lack of a striker and pretty abysmal defending, this was the reality. Amos was doing the best out of the starters, but in 12 fixtures, he only had 3 goals and 2 assists. In contrast, he was cooking in the Europa League with 4 goals, including 1 against Atletico Madrid. Okay, the other 3 were against Ferencvaros. That didn't matter to Jakub Nistrip, who desperately needed a win versus Rennes, and with Jason Knight of all people equalizing the affair late, it was just false hope. As in the 95th minute, Rennes striker was sent in behind and opened up the coffin. Nistrip was sacked, and Oscar Lopez was hired to fix everything. A former Barca youth coach, his previous managerial experience was getting sacked by Betis within 2 seasons. Despite that, Nice did win their first match with him, but then they had to play Newcastle in the Europa League. Oscar starts off using a 4-3-3, which means Amos had to be pushed to left wing. He can play there, but his physicals weren't as explosive compared to top wingers in the game. I'm sure he'll adjust. But Newcastle began scoring, and Nice were absolutely toothless. The reunion with Diop didn't go as expected.
It's Jover.
With Ligue 1 written off, it was Europe where Amos would shine. After the loss to Dynamo Kiev, North Macedonian club Shkupi were smashed, and Frankfurt were dealt with rather easily. Still, that wasn't enough for Nice to finish in the top 8, so just like in the Conference League last season, another playoff round. St. Gallen were the opponents, and Amos was the hero here. With a 0-0 at the away leg, the Nigerian would find a brace at home to move towards the round of 16. A rematch with Atletico Madrid was next. The league phase encounter earlier on saw them equalize in the final minutes. This time around, Nice would shut them out and get a 2-goal advantage following the first leg. That included Amos' assist to Ouattara. The second leg was intense, but Amos and John's goal was enough to move on to the quarters. I've kind of brushed aside Atleti, but while they're strong, they're not the force they once were. By this point, Amos was the 3rd top scorer.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Only behind Isak, which is fair enough, and a guy named Thomas Kaling from Nordsjælland. He's not important in this story. Nice hadn't lost the first leg yet, but that was about to happen versus Fiorentina until Watiao appeared and absolutely turned his opponent to equalize in the 92nd minute. That was enough to break a whole team's spirit, as Nice would handle La Viola, which included the 7 finishing Buisson scoring 2. Villarreal in the semi-final seemed to have gone to plan. Nice were 2-1 up after Amos assisted Buisson for the lead. However, here shows the problem with the French club this season. You saw that, right? The back 4 was perfectly set up, but in his space of 2 passes, it was a 3-on-2 for Villarreal. Then, in the last minutes, Christensen getting a second yellow for a handball was so cruel by the ref. So that's how Nice got 1 match away from another European final. Although, just have a look at their form following the playoff round. Not a lot of green, and no matter how hard you try to avoid mistakes you've been making, once it becomes a habit, it creeps in when it matters the most. At home to Villarreal before the halftime interval, Xabi was left wide open to give the Yellow Submarines a 1-goal aggregate lead. You'd expect to have the holes filled up off the back of the interval, but 1 minute into the second half, Centellas finds Morlanes for his second. Nice wouldn't find a shot on target for the entire 90, as not only did they miss out on the final, Not only were they going to miss out on Europe, but they nearly got relegated.
It ended badly.
There are fans who question why a player leaves after having a successful season with their team. Sometimes, it's best to leave on a high and take the next step while you have the momentum. Amos had that post-Conference League win. There was major interest from Atletico Madrid in the summer, and even Juventus during the winter when his stock was still high. In hindsight, they triumphed over Atletico, and would he be able to handle Antonio Conte?
Excuse.
But now, his interest is from Rennes, who did push PSG, but it's not the step up he was imagining. Bayern were also intrigued, but they quickly vanished. All of that was going on in his head. Meanwhile, the 2030 World Cup was beginning. Nigeria were placed in a group with Qatar and Spain. The Super Eagles had a new coach named Gavin Hunt, and he played a 4-4-2?
Oh, this shit again.
With Amos not even getting a second versus Qatar, it's as simple as Amos off, TV off. They were also missing 2 stars, Chukwueze, who retired after last year's AFCON failure, and Osimhen, who was injured. So they were basically missing their 3 best attackers, which saw them get smoked by host Spain in the second fixture. Yet again, not a single minute for Amos. Then, something weird was happening. Nigeria beat a formidable opponent, Uruguay, 2-1, with goals from Taiwo Awoniyi and Gift Orban. Then, with around 5 minutes away from elimination to Netherlands, Awoniyi pulled off a miracle and scored a brace in that time to win again. Against Denmark in the quarters, he grabbed another one. Despite Olusegun getting sent off before halftime, Nigeria held on and became the first African country to reach a World Cup semi-final. Remember, different universe. Almost to this point, still hadn't stepped onto the pitch, and he wouldn't do so in the semi-final versus Argentina. Once again, Nigeria was on the brink of elimination. A penalty was given, and Thiago Almada made no mistake about it. However, straight from a disallowed Alvarez goal, Nigeria went up the pitch, and a long ball to Awoniyi was not only on the money, but it was also converted. What's going on here? The match went to penalties. Maja scored, and Almada missed. So did Ndidi. Lautaro equalized, and that was followed up by Chroo, Nico Gonzalez, and Gift Orban, 3-2, and Julian Alvarez would buckle under the pressure. Akasan Yusuf could send Nigeria to the World Cup final, and of course he did. It's obviously frustrating for Amos to not have contributed whatsoever in this run, but you have to celebrate. Even if you're not directly contributing, you're part of something special. So he and his countrymen were off to the Santiago Bernabeu to face Italy in the World Cup final, a stage nobody expected Nigeria to be in. And yet, the dream from the beginning of this story could actually be a reality. Then the universe realized this wasn't supposed to be a fairy tale, and Italy scored in the second minute. Nigeria were heavy underdogs, but nobody was performing. All their juices ran out, but the coach left Amos on the bench, and with less than half an hour to go, Ego tripped up Colombo in the box, and Barella would make it 2. Colombo would score a brace not too long later, shattering the Nigerians' dream with an absolute pounding. With his countrymen in tears at the final whistle, Amos could only console them. He was obviously sad as a Nigerian, but also felt a sense of emptiness. Seeing Italy lift the World Cup just 20 meters in front of you really hit a hard truth. Many great players rarely ever get one chance at this illustrious prize, but the only chance Amos gets is one where he can't change a single thing about the outcome.
Baby, you give me ice and fire.
Amos finally moved clubs and got to play in the Premier League. Portuguese Premier League. The Nigerian joined Porto off the back of a World Cup. Reputation-wise, it's a step up from Nice, as they play in Europe's elite competition. However, for domestic affairs, it's technically a step down. Unfortunately, I can't speak much about it since I didn't have the TV rights to watch the Liga Portugal. Skipping a year, Porto coach Paulo Sousa did Paulo Sousa things and left for more money.
Be protagonist.
Sergio Conceição made a miraculous comeback, and Porto actually made it to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, defeating Atletico Madrid and Valencia on the way. Unfortunately, they fell short to Roma, which kinda seems like a missed opportunity. Regardless, despite being in 2031, all we know about the Liga Portugal standings was that Porto finished runners-up to Benfica, while Amos scored 14 times and got 2 assists. Add 6 goals and 3 assists to the Champions League, and you got a pretty successful start at Porto. Although they did lose the Portuguese Cup final. Still, Amos was considered the key player at Porto, and with improvements to his passing and physicals, he was starting to adapt well at left wing. Just not for Nigeria. The 2031 African Cup of Nations rolled around in the summer, and with the previous coach Gavin Hunt realizing he can't match what he did last year, the South African retired, and another one came in as the Super Eagles boss.
What does that say, Anaya?
What?
For South Africans, this is probably the easiest word ever. Oh, just Giti. Regardless, this was their new boss, and he actually played a formation that will see Amos step onto the pitch. With a relatively simple AFCON group, Amos was the best out of anyone. 3 wins and a goal difference of +12. The now healthy Aussie man was scoring the most, and Felix Agu was the top assist provider. Amos had 2 Player of the Match awards, and the highest average rating by far. That all continued in the round of 16 versus Zimbabwe, where Amos got a goal and an assist, while Aussie men scored a hat-trick. Algeria were the quarterfinal opponents, and Nigeria showed dominance early. Amos had a great opportunity, but he messed it up. Minutes later, Aussie men showed how it was done. A dream start, but a concerning thing to look out for is his and Amos's fitness. It wasn't even half time. Aussie men even got injured after a rough challenge, so Nigeria had to finish the job without him. Unfortunately, the defense wouldn't help, as Nduka, who played with Amos at the U20 World Cup all those years ago, mistimed his challenge. Not sure why he was playing center back, but Algeria's Theo Zidane equalized the encounter. Chances flew by, but this was going to extra time. Amos was dead, but the coach kept him in, which was concerning if they won the match. But he'll take this over being fit and wasting minutes on the bench. In the 98th minute, some clumsy defending nearly shattered everything, but it would be in the second half of extra time where the deadlock was broken. Algeria's keeper Lucas Zidane comes out to grab the— oh wait! He heads it to Amos! He heads to Awani, and the Nigerian takes advantage of an empty net. That mistake took Nigeria to the semi-finals. Cameroon were the opponents, the nation who eliminated them from the last iteration. Despite a 4-day break, Amos was not ready to start. The rest was also not enough for Aussie man, whose injury would prevent him from participating for the rest of the tournament. It was concerning for Nigeria, as just prior to the half-hour mark, they were cut apart for an Mbueno opener. So, how do you respond? By scoring a garbage goal off a corner kick, of course, the international way. In the second half, Cameroon were looking slightly better, but it was going to be another extra time affair. Amos was subbed in, although not fully fit. That wouldn't impact anything, as a bottle of ketchup missed a long ball, landing to Mofi, who took the lead for Nigeria, sending them to the— what are you doing, okay? Oh no! Cameroon equalizes! That led to a penalty shootout, and I think this is the first time Amos is ever participating in one. Regardless, Mofi calmly slaughtered the opener, while Mbueno— bro, you okay? Goal scorer Felix Amencha responded well, but so did Cameroon's Faris. Amos was up to give a 3-2 advantage, and Nigeria's number 15 put it top bins. That don't f with me aura intimidated Cameroon, specifically Fuchs, whose shot was easily stopped. Fassi would tuck in Nigeria's 4th, meaning all the pressure was on Borissi now, and Cameroon would be denied by OK again. Nigeria were off to the final, where they would face Morocco, led by Real Madrid winger Mustafa Wafi. Unfortunately, both countries' stars would start on the bench due to fitness issues. Who did that impact more? Well, both were getting some solid chances early, especially the Moroccans. Unlike a lot of AFCON finals you may have seen, this one was packed full of opportunities. However, none of these would open the encounter. Instead, a little before halftime, Awani was tripped in the box by Amra Bat. Mofi would get the first blood. A few more close calls came, but after this Morocco opportunity, nothing of significance happened until the last 10 minutes. Zanussi on the ball, and he puts in a brilliant delivery to Okoronkwo, whose header couldn't be denied. That broke Morocco's will, as Mofi would guarantee a victory late, making Nigeria's AFCON triumph emphatic. Amos' first international trophy, and while he nor Osimhen contributed in the final stages, they both were key to Nigeria's success, and the rest filled up the gaps when needed. So, what's next? Nothing for Victor, as he straight up dipped and retired from the international stage. Amos would later become the captain, but matching what they did in the past would prove to be difficult. Back to Amos' club career, his second season at Porto was upon us. One where he would have his best output thus far. A familiar face joined, with Reini Breinberg's transfer. Some other players came in, but the core of the Porto side included Oscar Cortez, João Mario, Jorge Morales, Thiago Sousa, Filip Krastev, Roberto Campolo, Kasper Tobias, and Canadian Stefan Sultan Eustáquio. It's been a couple years since the team won the Portuguese league, and thanks to Amos' performances, it was looking good. 7 wins and 1 draw to start things out. Unfortunately, a draw to Sporting set a trigger off. Conceição ditched the club for Atalanta. Fortunately, their interim Rafael Vicky only struggled with the first match, and even had an insane encounter with Bayern, finishing 5-5. Amos of course scoring and assisting in that. Porto wanted a full-time boss, and over a month went by until they finally appointed Pepe. With a history at Metz and Venezia, was he ready to take the Porto side to the title? Outside a loss to Manchester United, his first month went pretty damn well. Only a single goal conceded in 5 league encounters, that being a 2-1 win over Benfica. Porto were top of the table by 8 points, and Amos was impressing with 7 goals and 7 assists. The media described him as an elite attacking midfielder, but he continued to play on the left wing. Porto would eventually drop points, but those were far and few between, as Amos would lead Porto to the league title, not only with the most assists, but the top scorer too. Unfortunately, I couldn't show any of the Portuguese league highlights because of TV rights, because of that. And definitely not forgetting to confirm this. Being the best player in the Liga Portugal brought a lot of plaudits and interest from Manchester City. His side would also defeat Benfica in the Portuguese Cup final, claiming the double. A fantastic season that will surely see him take the next step, and 125k a week for 5 years? Alright, let's do a time skip.
3 years later.
Amos' Porto career would last longer than I anticipated. We're now in 2035, looking at a 29-year-old Amos with 2 years left on his deal. He had successful seasons, but on a personal level, none as good as the one you just saw. Nothing will be won until 2035, where Pepe's Porto dominated the Liga Portugal with 90 points. Amos was the vice captain and gathering interest once again. That would all have to wait for the African Cup of Nations, but for his country, things hadn't gone well. Nigeria were still the highest ranked African country, but the 2034 World Cup saw them lose to England in the round of 32, while the 2033 AFCON saw them eliminated by Ivory Coast in the quarters. In the present day, the same team eliminated them, but this time in the semis. They won the 3rd place playoff, where Amos showed off, scoring 4 versus Morocco. He got to play the tournament with his U20 World Cup pals, Nwosu and Aletu, who both were in Serie A. Not remarkable careers that seemed promising at one point, but they made it. Still, who was Amos showing off to embarrass Morocco? Well, his new fans. As Fabrizio would say,
"Here we go. The agreement is now completed between Newcastle."
Amos has finally made it to the Premier League with Newcastle United. It's actually a great team with defensive wonderkids grown up, a former teammate from Nice named Watiao, but the star was Bulgaria's Mihailov. Despite a couple pretty good years, he hasn't lived up to his promise yet. Oh, and there's also Declan Rice. Still led by Eddie Howe, can our favorite Nigerian achieve Premier League glory in his first season? His debut came versus Jamie Vardy's Watford.
It's just Jamie Vardy.
It was a game to remember for Mihailov as he scored a brace. Amos had a nice dribble in the game that led to a pre-assist, but maybe Watford are just bad since they gifted this. Not a memorable debut for the Nigerian, as he was subbed off in the 75th minute by Shelderup. Team-wise though, a solid start. Thankfully, Amos didn't have to wait long to score. He got the opener versus Brighton on his second match, which ended up being another simple victory for the Magpies. They were having a good start to the campaign, a win over Derby and Southampton, although a draw versus Everton was only saved by the Bulgarian beast. In all of these fixtures, Amos wasn't great, and that continued versus Tottenham. However, it didn't matter, as Mihailov was enjoying life. Despite Spurs equalizing in the 38th minute, Fresneda found Fabio Fachin moments later to take the lead back. The Italian is out of this world for his age, and the strike was enough. On Amos' Champions League debut with Newcastle, he actually had an okay game, but the only highlight was a shot from a tough angle. They were 1-0 up thanks to a penalty, but they couldn't hold on with a 35-year-old Vinicius Jr. equalizing. The man is still kicking despite being held together by tape. This competition wouldn't be the highlight in Amos' first season, and neither would the Carabao Cup. Due to his slow start and I presume fitness issues because, of course, he was not selected for the team in the following matches. A 3-0 win versus Leeds and an elimination in the Carabao Cup by Bournemouth. This is even a trophy that Spurs had won, but not Newcastle. Watching those games from the bench proved to be beneficial for him by the time he got back into the starting 11. Brentford on match day 8 saw a goal and an assist from the Nigerian for a 4-0 triumph. The game is ramped up again, with Manchester City and Liverpool next. Newcastle were on top of the table, and with the citizens up first, both sides exchanged goals within half an hour. Amos hasn't shined in the biggest moments yet, but after intercepting the ball, he immediately found Mikhailov, who took the offside? Even in 2035, Haaland is inevitable, getting the winner prior to halftime. If you want to know if he's been good in this story, yeah, no shit. It ended up being an awful night, and with Liverpool on their tail, Amos needed to show up, especially with Mikhailov out. Liverpool scored first. It was looking really ugly as Evan Ferguson doubled the lead in the 22nd. The Magpies were able to cut the score in half before the interval, but it was looking like there would be a three-way tie at the top. Then, with 5 to go, Chroo receives the ball. He finds Amos. Amos! Seaman made a big save near the end to keep Newcastle's place on top. The Nigerian finally stepped up when it mattered. He was starting to cook, getting a hat-trick against Bournemouth right after, but in another top-of-the-table clash, this time versus Arsenal, Howe puzzlingly benched him. It was 1-1 by the time he walked on, but all he did was see his teammates concede. 2023 U20 World Cup Golden Ball winner Hugo Novoa then subbed in and assisted Arsenal's third. Amos is still bitter about that tournament. Newcastle were no longer top of the table. They bounced back with West Ham seeing Amos assist Watiao in a 3-1 victory. He'd get another one versus Chelsea, this time to Meneses, a Colombian striker who is great, but not quite Mikhailov levels. That goal equalized affairs at Stamford Bridge, and the Colombian continued to lead the Magpies. A late winner against Leicester and a brace at home to Man United was surprisingly enough to bring the team back on top, even above an undefeated Liverpool. December is normally a difficult month for most Premier League sides, but it wasn't for Newcastle, as after the Manchester United result, 5 more wins arrived on the trot, which saw Amos score 3 and assist the same amount. By the new year, Newcastle were still on top, but the gap extended to 7 points above Liverpool, who were the first opponents of 2036. It was a game of few noteworthy moments, but in the 69th minute, the Nigerian was caught doing too many tricks, and Rooney later received the ball where he was pounded in the back for a penalty. Harvey Elliott took the lead, and it was looking grim for Newcastle. Then, when hope was needed, Liverpool lost the ball in midfield, and with Watiao on it, he found Mick Mason, whose stunning volley equalized the affair. Liverpool were dazed, and from the kickoff, they gave the ball away, but Juliano's long ball seemed too heavy. Mick Mason chased. In dramatic fashion, Newcastle won the match, which did see Amos finish with a 7.2 rating, although the plaudits were given to good old Mick, who barely played this season. Now, with our guy not fit for the Manchester City encounter just 4 days later, the TV was off, but Newcastle got a 4-0 win. Meneses got a brace, and Mick scored 1 as well. The standings were looking incredible, and to this point, Amos had 9 goals and 6 assists in 21 appearances. What was looking like the flop of the year was proving to be a smart piece of business. However, the good form was going to be halted. A 1-0 loss to Watford at home on the 12th, a draw to Palace 1 week later, then, in the beginning of February, Newcastle were smoked by Villa 4-0. Wins were there, but the large lead in the table began to shrink, and that was emphasized by a 1-0 loss to Manchester United. That 7-point gap over Spurs was going to be gone if they defeated Southampton. They lost 2-0. Amos wasn't having the best of times, so he needed to step up. His team didn't, losing to Forest in the 5th round of the FA Cup. However, Leicester and West Ham saw the Nigerian score thrice and assist 1 in 2 separate 3-1 victories. Newcastle still had a 3-point gap over Spurs, although scoring on Chelsea seemed like a difficult process, so Eric Garcia did it for them. Almost didn't do anything special, but the gap remained. Then they dropped a disaster class versus Bournemouth, meaning Spurs had another chance to equal the points tally. Once again though, they couldn't do it with a loss to Chelsea. Unfortunately for Amos, this is where his season ends. I got tickets to see Newcastle host Manchester United for my birthday. It was in the second leg of the Champions League quarterfinals, where the Magpies were trailing by 1 goal. Amos was looking sharp though, and in the 8th minute, he equalized the aggregate. Sadly, just 15 minutes later, he collapsed in agony. Taken off on a stretcher, his side would go on and make the Champions League semi-finals, where they'd unfortunately lose to PSG. He also didn't appear versus Arsenal in a 4-0 win. That was because he damaged his Achilles tendon and would be sidelined for many months. An injury like that at 30 years of age isn't good, but what really hurt was having to watch his team go for the title from the sidelines. The final key moment was matchday 36 with Tottenham. The 3-point gap to this point remained, and a win here would nearly clinch the title. No Amos? No problem. A bit after half an hour, Newcastle struck first, with the Italian playmaker scoring with a lovely strike. That had Spurs down, and following the interval, it wouldn't take long for the Bulgarian wonder Mihailov to double the lead. Spurs got dominated, and I guess you can say
it's the history of the Tottenham.
Newcastle would clinch the title on the penultimate day versus Everton. 3 second-half strikes took away a 45th minute scare, and as Amos ran onto the pitch on his crutches like Harry Kane, he won his first prize in England. 12 goals and 8 assists in 30 appearances was incredible. This was him at his peak, and it's unfortunate of the injury's timing. However, he got a Premier League medal and was a champion. His career wasn't done yet though. In his second season at Tyneside, his side wouldn't repeat as Premier League champions, but they won the Community Shield over Southampton and got to an FA Cup final. Although it wasn't looking good. Down 1-0 to Bournemouth, Amos had a shocking performance, leading to him getting subbed off. It wasn't his day, but the team woke up with an equalizer off some shady defending. It looked like it was going to extra time, but in the final moments, Fachin was left wide open to grab a 94th minute winner. The FA Cup checked off. In his third season, a Carabao Cup final versus Tottenham. Unfortunately, I don't have the footage, but Newcastle won 2-1 and Amos was the man of the match. Don't be sad, Spurs fans. You won the Premier League title in 2037 and 2038. However, that means there was only one trophy Amos had not won yet. The Papa John's Trophy? No, the Champions League. In Amos' 3 campaigns at Newcastle, they made the semi-finals twice, but lost to PSG on both occasions, who by the way are being approached by an Indian tycoon. With this season ending, it would be now 10 years since Newcastle had won the Champions League. Crazy to say they won one at all, but money talks. Even crazier, Leicester City got to lift the big ears, defeating PSG in surprising fashion. I'll show some of their key players on screen right now, but it wasn't anything I ever expected. Yet, here we are. So in Amos' 4th season, he and the boys were desperate to finally get to the Champions League final, even sacrificing the domestic competitions if they had to. The goal was reached, defeating Sporting in the round of 16, Dortmund in the quarters, and Manchester City in the semi-final. They would face Leicester City. This was Amos' best shot to win it, especially with his output slowing down. Facing off against another Nigerian in Bala Chukwu, he wanted to get this one over his countrymen. There wasn't anything to really celebrate internationally with some egos clashing, but that's not important here. Trophies can distinguish you from others, but unfortunately, Amos was not having the most successful of days. He had promising moments as a player of his talent would, but it wasn't resulting in output, which saw him subbed out prior to extra time. It was a weird final, but one without the ball hitting the back of the net, meaning glory for Newcastle was separated by penalties. All the Nigerian could do was watch. Leicester were up first, and they got stopped. Mikhail Sant opened accounts for Newcastle. Bosch and Collin both exchanged pens, and the same went for Chukwu and Watiao. A 1-goal lead remained for the Magpies, with Leicester's Artur stepping up in the 4th round. And he was denied. So it was Elliot Turner who could win Newcastle the prestigious prize. He's kind of a bad player, but he banged home the clincher, handing them the Champions League, meaning Amos actually did it. From playing in the Nigerian divisions, ups and downs in France, a stunning move to Portugal, to now winning everything he could at Newcastle. Amos' career will be a memorable one. It went on for 3 more years, where he would retire at age 36. He slowed down at Newcastle and finished things off with Khan in Ligue 1. Funnily enough, he, Nwosu, Buisson, and Motabang all retired in the same season. While everything didn't go the way he expected, I think Amos will be proud looking back on his career. And yes, Eddie Howe is still at Newcastle. 20 freaking years. Incredible. If you want to start a new FM save with Amos, a free editor data file with him is on my Patreon.